Greetings, friends. Welcome to our video on qualitative research methodology. As we outlined last week, there are two basic kind of research methodologies, qualitative and quantitative. And we're going to tackle qualitative research methodology first. And in this video, we're going to talk quite a bit about qualitative research methodology, but also say a little bit of the differences between the two, but also some of the similarities. We talked last week about the basic or the foundation of any kind of a study is the identification of a research topic, research problem, a research question, and specifying a purpose. And you can see in this chart that those steps take place at the very beginning of the process. And then you get to the place where once you've asked the question, you think about, well, what kind of data will I need to collect in order to be able to answer that question, and then also how would that data be processed. And this is where you start making a decision about what kind of research method that you will choose. Every answer to every research question requires the collecting of data. What is different is how that data, what kind of data is collected and how that data is processed. And that's where you run into the differences between qualitative and quantitative research methodology. So for tonight's class, what we're going to do is talk about what happens if you go the qualitative route in your research methodology. And here are the 8 topics that we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about the basic assumptions about qualitative research, their core characteristics, and then just the basic kind of approaches that you would take if you were going to take a qualitative research approach. The type of data that you collect, just recognize some basic assumptions about how this approach would work. Then we're going to talk rather extensively about the differences between qualitative and quantitative research, and for you to begin to start thinking about how you would make that decision. So what are the basic assumptions about qualitative research methodology? Well, as we talked about last week, qualitative research methodology comes out of a postmodernist philosophical foundation. By that we mean that life is not neat or orderly, that it's very difficult, if possible at all, to get a handle on something called objectivity, or to know something is true without qualification. In fact, we don't even try to make those claims in a qualitative research approach. And because we know that research is, or knowledge is socially constructed, we understand that there will be an interaction between the subjects of the research and the researcher with other individuals if any kind of a truth claim can be made. And with a qualitative research approach, a truth claim or an assertion is always qualified with a number of qualifications. The subjectivity and the bias of the researcher, the inability to truly understand all the facts that go into explaining any kind of phenomenon is all stated right up front. So how do you go about conducting a qualitative research project or a thesis? Well, what you are going to try and do is you are going to try and observe individuals or interview individuals in their natural setting. Make them as comfortable as you can. If you interview them, observe them as inobtrusively if you can, if you do some observations. But you want to see what's going on. You want to hear firsthand from them. And you understand that you yourself, as the researcher, are an instrument. Now, by that we mean that you, the person that collects data, who writes down the notes during an interview, you have your own filters and you have your own biases. And that's stated straight up. An instrument in a quantitative research methodology might be a form or a test that someone takes, and you don't have very much to do with the administrating of that, unless, of course, you gave the test or you made the test up. But for a qualitative person who's doing interviews, the fact that you are biased is unmistakable, and that you will ask questions that reflect your interest and your perspective, and you will process those as well. These are taken from the text. I won't go and explain all of them, but a couple of them I wanted to highlight is the third from the bottom one, the emergent design. We'll use the word a lot, of the process being iterative. That means you keep going back and forth between data and analysis, analysis and data analysis. You might come to some conclusions, interview somebody else, and all of a sudden your conclusions are challenged. And that's just the nature of this kind of research, and we expect that to happen. The last piece, the last distinctive, the last core characteristic is that in the account, you write what's called thick, rich description. That means we want as much detail, quotations, colorful words, so that when you are describing the phenomenon, the person that who's reading it gets a feel for what you're talking about. So as you see here, that reliance on the text and images and interviews is a iterative process in that you are making those observations and analyses, and then you go back and you do it again, and you go back and forth throughout the entire process. So what makes this different? Well, in qualitative research, you appeal to the head as well as the heart. Some of the articles that you read on from a qualitative perspective can be very moving. You hear people's own words, and you can hear oftentimes the perspective of the researcher in the account, and that's certainly allowable. In fact, this is the favorite form of research methodology from people who have an interest in gender studies, race studies, what we call social justice, or looking into social justice issues. And so we want there to be a polemical piece to all this, where somebody is being moved in the reading of it. The type of data that you collect, you do interviews, one-on-one interviews, sometimes in groups. Sometimes you observe what's going on and maybe make notes from what you observe in terms of human behavior. And you certainly can collect and analyze documents and use that as a part of the data collection process as well. So what do you do in this process? Well, you need to listen, and you need to be a keen observer, and see what you can see, hear what you can hear. And it's no exaggeration to say that two people doing the same kind of qualitative research may come up with completely different opinions because of their own biases. You may hear the same interviews or observe the same events going on, and come away with different perspectives on things. And from a qualitative perspective, that's perfectly fine. We're not interested in the definitive story of this. You're just adding your piece. And if someone else wants to come along and add their piece, well, that just makes the topic or the phenomena that you're investigating just that much more interesting and that much more rich. Now, you try to be objective as you can. It's not like you are completely slanted, but you realize from the beginning that you have you have limitations in how unbiased and objective you can be. So what's the bottom line for qualitative research? Deep and multifaceted knowledge of the person, situation, or the event. You become deeply involved with the phenomena, the people that you're studying. You ask questions from a multiple perspective, and then you describe that event in a rich kind of way. Now, we don't know much about quantitative research methodology just yet, but just so you can see where we're going a little bit, so we can talk about the distinctives or the differences between qual and quant. As you can see from this chart, the qualitative researcher, their methodology and their approach emerges as they get involved in material. A quant person will decide in advance that they have a survey that they want to give, or an instrument they're going to use, or a test that they're going to give, and that frames their investigation. The qualitative person uses open-ended questions. We want as lot of information as we can from a lot of sources, a lot of interviews and observations and documents that we're going to be taking a look at. At the very end, the data presentation, what you are going to look for as a qualitative researcher is you're going to look for themes and patterns and similarities between the events and the people that you interview. Whereas on the quant side, you're going to run a statistical analysis on the data that you've collected and come up with a very definitive, descriptive interpretation of that event. As we've noticed, as we saw last week, each of these methodologies does have a a certain kind of methodology that's grounded in a certain kind of philosophy. And on the qualitative side, it is a constructivist, where knowledge is being formed in community with other people. That transformative, I don't know if you remember that, but the transformative perspective is those people who really are looking to change society or change a way a particular group functions or change the experiences of the people that are being studied. And so it has that transformative piece to it. We're not just indifferent to what happens to our subjects. So we want, if there's racial injustice, that to be corrected, biases that affect the way certain genders are perceived to be changed, and so on. So how can you determine whether you're going to use qualitative or quantitative methodology? Well, here's a chart that also is in Moodle, and so I won't spend a lot of time going over this, so you can download it and take a look at it. But if you want to take a look at this, on the left-hand side is the kind of the checklist that you'll go down in your mind to see whether or not you're going to do quant or qual. But basically, if you're looking for an in-depth understanding of a situation, you want to get at reasons and motivations to understand a problem. If you're interested in explaining something in great detail, that's the kind of approach that you probably would take. Now, people who are interested in stories and storytelling, people who have that kind of orientation usually go towards the qualitative side of things. The quant people, if you're a math person and you want to study something with that kind of precision, you'll probably be on the right-hand side of this chart. But for now, you don't need to make that decision. Just need to keep it in the back of your mind that this is these are two of the two approaches that we're talking about in this class. And for the activities that you're going to be looking at today or this week, it's going to be you're going to be looking at the qualitative side, and we can make some decisions later on about whether this is the side for you to land on. Well, that's about it. Hopefully, this is enough of an information that introductions. When you read the information from the text, you're able to make better sense of it, and also that the activities in this unit will make sense to you as well.